God is saying, I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to be a failure. I don't want you to experience frustration and lack and scarcity. Even in the midst of this, I want to reorder not only your finances, I want to reorder your heart. I want to reorder your mindset. And ultimately, and you can speak to this as well, this is a principle that runs from Genesis to Revelation, is God is always saying, I have to be first. Not because I'm in desperate need of your attention, but this is the way that it works.
100%.
This is the way that you will experience blessing and you will experience success.
Right. Well, hey, you're watching What Was That About? Thank you for joining us for today's episode. I'm Moses Khan. I'm with lead pastor here at All People's Church, Tony Soldano. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Are you? You're in a mood today.
I'm in a mood.
You're in a mood.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've
had a busy weekend, so we're probably a little bit tired, and so we're a little bit funny today. But we're not talking about funny things.
We're talking about serious things.
Serious things. Yeah. We prayed serious prayers.
Yeah.
Before this program.
That's right.
I hope God helps us.
He will. He will. Yeah. So we're talking about
money. We're talking about wealth, right?
All time.
Yeah.
We're talking about money. And we did a series. We're in the middle of a series on money. Every year you do this. Now I know people are watching this and going, "Oh, here we go. Pastor's talking about money." This is something you actually fought the Lord against, and you felt like, no, as a, from God, a prompting to do this so that people can manage their finances and not be sloppy, and also bring honor and order and the prosperity and the blessing of God into their lives. So we've been in this series on Money Matters. What has been the most impactful, important thing we've tackled in this series for you?
I'll be honest, this series has taken on almost like a life form of its own that I was not expecting. And a lot of it really to me has come down to revelation of God being a giver and the heart of God. And people have just been touched in such a profound way.
Yeah.
And our foundation is biblical. Jesus taught a lot about money, or his stories and parables had to do a lot with wealth and resources. But what it actually has become is not what I thought it would be. It hasn't just been about, okay, these are principles of gaining wealth, but rather to understand the heart of the Father towards his children. And this past Sunday we were in Malachi, and a lot of times preachers will use the, you're cursed with a curse. But we took it from a very different perspective. And maybe you can, I thought you laid out in our third service the background so beautifully. Maybe why don't you lay that out so we can kind of lay out the conditions that were going on and then understanding what God was saying in response.
Yeah. So this is out of Malachi chapter 3, the famous verse, will you rob God, right? And so he says, hey, if you just put me to the test and trust me in your tithe, that I'll open the storehouses, I'll open the windows of heaven and I'll rebuke the devourer on your behalf. So the background there is Israel has come out of exile. They're learning to rebuild their lives. We had to do that out of 2020, out of COVID. We were learning to rebuild our lives. So they're doing that. But they make the mistake of getting the order wrong. So they're not putting God first. They're putting their own priorities first. And so God says, hey, you're actually neglecting me. You're neglecting my house, the temple, and the things of God. And that's why you're experiencing resistance. You're experiencing famine because you've given permission to the devourer over your life. But if you trust me with the first 10%, with that, and that's just a significance to say, put me first. That's what God is saying. And so if you trust me with this, then I will actually fight on your behalf. Not only will I be your provider, I'll be your protector. And I'll rebuke the devourer on your behalf for your sake so that you can actually experience the blessing of God in their life. So that's the background, that's the setting, which is beautiful because in the midst of Israel's neglect and disobedience, God goes, hey, I actually want to bless you.
Right.
So I want to bring the right order into your life so that you experience blessing.
Right. And so God was building a case. I mean, he talks about literally, you're robbing me. I'm not first. You're criticizing me unfairly and unduly.
Right.
And your words, he says, your words have been harsh. You know what I mean? You've said some hard things about me. And by the way, I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm listening to the things that either you are saying or you're not saying. But I hear the murmurings of your heart. You know, the things that, the old, did I say that out loud?
Right.
Well, even when we don't say that out loud, God
hears it.
God hears it. And so in the midst of it, where he could retaliate and say, well, that's it, more punishment because you haven't learned your lesson, is the heart of God that says, here's what I want to do for you. I want to rebuke the devourer.
Yeah.
I want to rebuke the destroyer in your life that's coming in like locusts and cankerworms and eating, whatever little you may have. I want to open the windows of heaven. And we made a comment that, you can't even open those windows on your own.
That's right.
He says that the fruit of your ground won't fail, that the vine won't fail. God is saying, I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to be a failure. I don't want you to experience frustration and lack and scarcity. Even in the midst of this, I want to reorder not only your finances, I want to reorder your heart. I want to reorder your mindset.
Yeah.
And ultimately, and you can speak to this as well, this is a principle that runs from Genesis to Revelation, is God is always saying, I have to be first.
Yeah.
Not because I'm in desperate need of your attention, but this is the way that it works.
100%.
This is the way that you will experience blessing and you will experience success.
Right.
And in this particular case, the context is finances, right, and revenue. And without it, you open, I'm trying to open up the windows, but you're opening doors so that the devourer has legal right and access to you.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what we have to understand, and we have a hard time with this because sometimes we have such a temporary mindset, is, we're writing a shorter story than God.
Right.
God's writing a longer story than the one we're writing.
Yes.
And so the story we're writing is for 70, 80 years. The one he's writing is for eternity.
Right.
And so unless we put him first, he can't go before us.
Right.
And so I think that's why God is like, hey, allow me to be first so that I can go before you. And then we know in the New Testament, Matthew, and Jesus says this in Matthew, where, seek first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness. And then all these things will be added to you.
Yes.
What's he saying? Hey, keep the priority.
Right.
Right? Allow me to be the priority, the kingdom to be the priority. And then all these other things, they're going to get added because you're going to allow me to go first. You're going to allow me to go before you. And then that signifies that the rest of what I have also belongs to God.
Right.
If I choose to put him first, then everything else belongs to God because that's what I'm saying. By putting him first, I'm saying, hey, everything I own belongs to God.
Yeah. And we see this struggle. It's not new to us. We see it in the garden. We see it with Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Where Abel puts God first.
Right.
And Cain does not.
Yeah.
And then that literally leads to him murdering his brother. They come out of a worship service and somebody dies.
That's right.
And really, what's the context of it? And the content? Money.
Yeah.
It's about wealth and giving to God.
That's right.
Will we put God first? And it is a struggle in human nature.
Such a struggle.
Because we have this survival mentality. We really believe we care more about ourselves than God does. We struggle with, does God really care about me? Peter even, he writes and he says, hey, cast your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you.
Right.
That's a struggle for us.
Yeah.
Does God really care for me? And will he really act on my behalf?
Yeah.
So right there in the verses, Pastor Mo, he says, I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, not for my sake, for your sake.
Crazy.
And so you and I, we were kind of discussing off air that, it's one thing to read that and even believe it, but when we see God actually move on our behalf, and we heard an amazing, powerful testimony. It's online.
Yeah.
You can see it in our services. But when God actually does it for our sake, then we go like, wow.
Yeah.
Did God really do that for me? And that brings us to a whole new level of faith. Because now it's just not, I want to be careful when I say this, it's not just pages on the Bible that we kind of go like, well, God did it for them.
Yeah.
But will he do it today?
That's it.
Will he do it for me?
Yeah.
And what does that say about how he values us, which you talked about?
Huge. And this is why talking about money and finances is so important. As much as it makes people uncomfortable and it's this sacred, thing that they don't want, why do we have to talk about money in church, whatever. It's like, you have to understand there's so many layers to this that if we don't talk about it, then we're not actually, you're not getting to the depth of maybe your trust or your lack of trust in God, whether you actually believe he cares for you, that he values you, that he sees you not as a slave, but as a son and a daughter. And so it's like, you can't get to those root issues if we don't delve into these kind of conversations. And so God says, hey, I'm doing this for your sake. Like, why would he say that unless there was, a belief within the mindset of Israel that believed or wondered, does God care for me? Right? And it's like, we're always doing things for him. Like, will he do things for us?
Right.
And so in the New Testament, Jesus goes, hey, look at the birds. See how they're fed?
Right.
And they're not freaking out?
Right.
And look at the flowers and the lilies.
Right.
See how they're clothed in beauty and splendor? He goes, guess what's doing that? Your Father in heaven.
Your Father.
And he asks this crazy question, which is wild to me. He says, are you not of more value? Now, what's wild to me is that he doesn't say, hey, I want to tell you, you value more than those things. He goes, aren't you of more value? And it's almost as if he brings them, he forces them to answer the question for themselves. It's kind of like what he does with Peter. Peter, do you love me? And he's drawing that out. And so he draws it out and he goes, yeah, aren't you of more value? And it's the answer is a resounding yes.
Right.
Right? And so then you can actually live understanding, man, God is actually for me.
Right.
And that just sets me so free. Because now I don't have to hoard and I don't have to hold on and I don't have to protect. I can be generous. I can plan. I can use wisdom and all the rest of it. I don't have to be, Pastor, I don't have to do things that are, suspicious.
Yeah.
I can actually do things in the light.
Right.
And things that are true and honorable because I know, hey, if I do the right thing, God's going to honor me.
Yeah. And what I love even in that story is where Jesus there, not only does he draw it out of them, but now he redefines the relationship because he could have said, hey, listen, my Father cares for you.
That's right.
But he says, your Father. So not only is he my Father, he is your Father. And therefore, if he's your Father, then your sons and your daughters, which now changes the fact that we're just, hey, slaves of this robotic God, which is what Christ came to bring us, was the heart of the Father. And so by saying, hey, look, this is your Father. Your Father in heaven that has control over the windows of heaven, that wants to pour out a blessing, by the way, which you can't contain. Redefining that relationship. Yeah. What father wouldn't give their children good things and the things that they require? And so when he's pointing to nature, that he's saying, listen, something controls this. Someone controls this that was here before you.
Yeah.
And if he's taken such meticulous care and there is such order in nature and in the environment. Like, this is what I never understand about all these climate people and usually the people on the left, that they worship the nature and they don't understand. They worship the creation and they don't understand the creator God that holds it all in order. You stop at the creation. And so here's what the Lord Jesus was saying. Don't stop at the creation. Don't just marvel at these things and the order of them. Understand who's behind it. Oh, and by the way, it's your Father.
That's right.
And as much as he loves his creation, which he does, he loves you more.
That's right.
You know what I mean? He cares about you more. If he's going to care about the birds and the fish and the lilies, and by the way, he says they're here today and they're gone tomorrow. Are you not of more value?
Wild.
Do you not matter more to him than these things? And he said, and these things matter to him. They're his creation. He gets they glorify him.
That's right.
And yet you are of much greater value. And I think when we change our mindset and we understand that we matter to God, and I want to bring even some clarity here, Pastor Mo, that sometimes then we make it, we move in the place. No. We're not going to move in the place of God. We're not going to put ourselves in like, look how much we matter. Yeah, we're the apple of his. Yeah, but that's not because of us. It's because of him.
That's right.
It should show us his great love, his great care, his great concern.
Yeah. When you understand that in its proper context, you don't take his seat, you take your seat.
Come on. And you don't have to take his seat.
Yeah, you take your seat, not his, right? So you take your seat at the table.
Wow.
Understanding that he sits on his. And so that, I don't know, like, let me ask you, did you have a moment in your life that you could think of like I saw that the Father, like he came through because he cares for me?
Well, let me go deeper than that. I just never trusted the Father. I never knew the Father. I never trusted the Father. I would always go to Jesus. I figured Jesus loved me. Jesus died for me. Jesus came. Until someone pointed out, you don't have a good relationship with the Father. And my first reaction was like, talk about it. And it was true.
Yeah.
I didn't know the Father. I didn't trust the Father.
Wow.
You know, you just kind of have, well, he's angry. He's mean. You know, he's the punisher. Not understanding it was the Father that
Sent the Son.
sent the Son. Now, you know, God is one. So let us be careful. But we understand the Trinity, the Father, you know, the manifestation of Father, Spirit, and Son.
Yeah.
And they all have a role. And so
right.
here, Jesus himself is pointing to the Father.
Yeah.
This is who he is. This is what he's like. And this is what I want you to understand. So yeah, I did have which revolutionized my entire faith. Not that I put Jesus aside, but I'm like, wow, there's a Father that loves me. And there is something, or some things you receive from the Father that you just don't receive from anybody else. And there are things you receive from the Son and from the Holy Spirit.
Right.
But ultimately, the Father, Jesus said, is the greatest, right? He's the one.
So how did God bring you into that place of trusting the Father then?
You know how it started? I remember going home that night. It was almost like I had I don't want to say another born again experience, but an epiphany. And you know what you know how it started, Pastor Mo, to be honest? I mean, you're bringing me back now. I had to go to the Father in prayer and open my heart and just say, I don't know you. I don't trust you.
Wow.
And as I'm saying these things, I remember something very painful took place in my life, which I had prayed that would not happen, that ultimately happened. And then from that moment, it was like I blamed him. And so now what am I going to do? I'm not going to be without God. Well, Jesus always, you know, I can always go to the Savior. The Savior's going to have compassion. The Father's mean.
Yeah.
And out of that, and I had to, you know what I had to say, my brother, that I had to say to him, it was not your fault.
Wow.
What and how did I know this? Literally, as I'm praying and I'm talking to him, it's like a movie that's playing, and I know exactly where I am. I know exactly how I'm holding God accountable in my court of justice. And I had to say to him, you know what? That it wasn't your fault. And I'm sorry that I held you accountable. And I held you guilty, more than accountable, I held you guilty. Wow. And I just said, I don't trust you. And from there, I don't know, my heart was just flooded with his love, with his acceptance. When I released him from my court of justice and my verdict of guilty, that's really, it was just open, sincere, raw.
Yeah.
And he can take it.
Right.
He can take it.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a moment.
That's amazing.
It was a moment.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I don't share that very often, but
Well, here we got it here on the podcast.
wow. I wasn't expecting that today. Yeah.
And so I think that's what Jesus is trying to do, is he's trying to open people up to the heart of the Father.
Right.
As it relates to their finances, as it relates to their wealth, as it relates to the management of their and you know, we talk about principles and wisdom and all that, and that's very important. We're not negating that. But as we operate in principles and wisdom, we have this faith that the Father is working all things together for good.
Yeah.
That he will use what the enemy meant for evil for good.
Yeah.
And so we walk that out.
And you know, Pastor Mo, and we talked about this too, you know, today, of all the teachers that are online and how tithing isn't in the New Testament and all, you are literally teaching people to rebuke the protector.
Come on.
You're teaching people to rebuke the protector and to invite the devourer. Now, your first criticism of us is going to be, well, you're pastors, and of course you're, no. You know, we've talked about this before. The tithe precedes the law. Abraham tithed. You know, we see it in the garden. And you are teaching people to like throw out their insurance policy and get rid of their protector, because you talked about the law of permission. And so by doing that, they invite the devourer. And by the way, the majority of these people that are anti-tithe teaching, right, are probably a disaster when it comes to their own finances. And you say, well, how do you know everybody? Well, the ones that I have spoken to that have been very hostile with me, their finances are a disaster.
Right.
because they don't have the right order. And if you really want to fight the tithe, right? Okay, then let's go into the New Testament. So if the tithe is Old Testament, the New Testament ought to be, we ought to go beyond that.
That's right.
Where people were selling houses and possessions, and we have the widow. Now, you see, the people that teach against the tithe, they don't want to teach that side.
That's right.
Because they're non-givers. They're not generous people.
So true.
They're just trying to relieve people from giving, which is biblical.
Yeah.
So you don't teach generosity.
That's right.
You teach people how not to be like God, how not to be like Christ. You're not telling people, hey, let's not tithe, let's go beyond it. They don't teach that.
That's right.
Right? They teach how they actually want to reduce your level of
Yeah.
giving.
Yeah. That's right.
And so, you rebuke the protector and you invite the devourer.
100%.
It's pathetic.
100%. When grace touches your finances, your generosity should increase. That's the reality of it. That's the reality.
And even where Paul, talks about, what is it, the church in Macedonia, where they what did they give out of their poverty?
Out of their poverty.
Why didn't Paul say, hey, no, you
Out of
keep
their
it.
lack.
No, you keep it. You don't have enough. We'll get another church
That's
to
right.
give to you. No, he commended them.
He did, yeah.
He took it from them. He received it because it was honorary unto God. In other words, it was a greater sacrifice for those people that had lack.
That's right.
Than those that maybe were flowing in hey, riches are we can
100%.
do this.
Yeah.
For them it was sacrificial. That's that sweet smelling fragrance unto God that nobody wants to talk about that.
That's it.
But here's the truth. The principle doesn't change based on your economic status.
That's right.
The kingdom doesn't work on, well, you have more, you have less. It doesn't work like that.
That's right.
So I believe in equal sacrifice versus equal giving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I one thing I say, it's not about the amount, it's about the weight, right? Which is what Jesus communicated with the widow,
Wow, I'm telling you.
right? Wow. She only gave 2. No, it weighed more than the rest.
It weighed more. It weighed more.
Because she gave out of her lack. She gave out of her poverty.
Right. Having given all she had.
All she had, yeah.
I mean, she's like, okay, the next step is, I guess, if God doesn't come through, I die. Now, we don't know the rest of the story. We don't
right.
know
We
what
don't.
happened to that
We don't.
widow.
We don't.
Jesus doesn't even say, well, here's what God, no, we don't know. All we know is this is what she did, and Jesus honored it. Here again, he redefined giving and worship,
Yeah.
right? He didn't order the disciples to go give her her might. No. Or, hey, it's okay, woman, you don't have to give.
Yeah.
That's the part of God we don't understand and we don't like and we don't appreciate.
Yeah.
And maybe we criticize him for. But at the end of the day, we're not going to have a heaven, Pastor Moses, where that widow is going to be in front of God and say, I outgave you.
I outgave you. Yeah.
My weight was greater than your
Right.
weight. This is what I think the windows of heaven represent. And where it says, that you cannot contain. In other words, here's what God is saying. I can overwhelm you.
Yeah.
I can overwhelm you.
Yeah.
And we see it with Jesus and the disciples, with the fish. Like Jesus was constantly saying, I can overwhelm you. This is not what it's about. I can overwhelm you.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I'm sure we have people going like, well, let God overwhelm me. Hey, listen, that is the heart of the Father.
heart of the God.
The question is, what are you going to do with it once you're overwhelmed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Maybe I'm
good.
going to call Sunday's message, I can overwhelm you.
I can
What do you
overwhelm.
think?
That's good.
Yeah.
I like it. This is good.
Wow, this
I
is
feel like
good.
we can keep going.
Mud.
We're out of
Wow.
time.
Awesome.
Hey, listen, let us know in the comment section what you think about this. I know this can be a sensitive topic, but again, our heart is to communicate his heart. And so hopefully you felt that.
And can I say, I know we're closing,
Yeah.
but I want to just be very, very clear. We're not here to manipulate people,
That's
get things.
right.
We're trying to
100%.
teach people
Yeah.
so we can get things to people and through them.
through them, yeah.
Not so that we can get more from them.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I stopped your closing.
That's good. Hey, listen, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like this video, share it with a couple of people. It helps us to continue to do what we are called to do here on this channel. Pastor, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, God bless you. We'll see you next time.